Okay, you're live.
All right, this is the Senate Transportation Committee. It is Wednesday, February 14th, Valentine's Day. Big crowd for Valentine's Day. We're going to start off with Patrick Murphy with the Agency of Transportation and talk about several things perhaps. So we'll pass it on to you.
Great. For the record, Patrick Murphy, Sustainability Innovations Project Manager at Vermont Agency of Transportation. Apologies for arriving a few minutes late, but hopefully that was enough time to read through the legislative report that was filed a couple of weeks ago on all of this. If not, we'll go through sort of the highlights. So as you recall, we were here about this time last year, so happy anniversary. We brought to you discussion of mileage-based user fee to apply to fully electric vehicles and light-duty vehicles. See if I can get this to progress. Okay. So as you recall, we've got a revenue issue. We're falling short because of electrification, not primarily because of electrification. The past several years has really been due to the just overall improvement to the fuel economy of the fleet. But this is going to be a growing problem. Right now, we now have about 12,000, almost 13,000 plug-in electric vehicles. More than half of those are fully electric, and they pay no gas tax. They pay no extra amount into the transportation fund except through whatever additional amount comes through the purchase and use tax.
Could I just interrupt? Because you're hybrid though, they're using both electricity and gas, right? So
Well, some hybrids definitely use both
it
gas
says
and
plug-in
electric.
hybrid electric. So hybrid to me means that they're using both electric and gas.
That's right.
So for that group of automobiles, we are getting, it's much smaller, but we are getting some.
And it really depends on the use of those vehicles.
Yeah,
Some
if it's
people
very
may not
low
be-
mileage, they may never need to.
Some people may not be plugging in at all, and so then they're paying the full amount of the gas tax, but likely some percentage of that.
Certainly, I assume all EVs are.
Yeah. So, and that's becoming an increasingly smaller share of the vehicles that are being purchased, of the plug-in vehicles that are being purchased. So more and more people are purchasing the all-electric vehicles versus the plug-in hybrids, and that's a technology that's expected to sort of phase out over the next few years. So this is this comes from a 2016 report where it estimated or attempted to estimate where we would be or where we ought to be for the implementation of any road usage charge. But essentially in various places, we've seen 15% number of new vehicle sales being electric, whether that's plug-in hybrids or fully electric. And right now, from prior testimony that you've heard from Matt Cota, we're at about 10% for this past year of new vehicle sales are electric vehicles. And this is just modeling the where we need to be able to meet some of our climate goals. So 27,000 vehicles roughly for 2025, and then 126,000 by 2030.
So the 18,835, we said that's the estimated threshold.
That was the estimated threshold based on prior modeling back in 2016. So it's kind of getting at, where we would be if we were at 15% basically by that year. So we, as a state, Vermont did adopt the Advanced Clean Cars 2 California regulations. And so that will guarantee delivery, more or less, of about 35% of new vehicle sales by 2026. So we're rapidly becoming closer and closer to that 15% mark and going far beyond it. This is a projected modeling. I believe you've seen something to this effect last year. Projected modeling of the growth in electric vehicles over time. And you can see that rapidly increasing in 2026. And then on the right-hand side of this slide, we're seeing what would happen if what we've proposed or what we're proposing were actually implemented. So it's taking the modeling that was done through the Climate Action Plan on EV adoption and applying that increased flat fee for plug-in hybrids and then a mileage-based user fee for fully electric vehicles. So as you can see, the quicker that we see higher EV adoption, the more we're going to see revenue losses on an annual basis, over $5 million perhaps by 2026. So a road usage charge is a gas tax. That's an attempt to try and approximate what a vehicle's impact upon the road system has been, but that over the last several decades has become increasingly a poor indicator of relative impacts because of increasing fuel efficiency. A mileage-based user fee has been enacted in a few states. Generally have some combination of in-vehicle telematics or a plug-in device, onboard plug-in device. But then there's also some other reporting mechanisms. What we're proposing is just using the existing systems that we have through the vehicle inspection, annual vehicle safety inspection process, and building upon that. So that we don't get into privacy concerns, we don't get into high costs of being able to collect that data, and then we're able to apply a fee to that. And then other states, as you'll see, many states have adopted an annual flat fee, which is generally just a surcharge from the registration fee.
The one thing about user fee, and maybe we think about it differently, but a lot of our travel, a lot of people are actually traveling outside the state of Vermont. I suppose you could say, well, they're buying gas, but sometimes they're not. They're just, their jobs might be in Littleton or Hanover, Lebanon, for example, or even a little bit further into another state. And we have a lot of border, Massachusetts, New York. What if people have that kind of travel outside the state of Vermont, they are going to, their usage is not on the Vermont infrastructure, but their mileage would all count as though it were on the Vermont highway. There's no perfect system. I'm just saying we worry about the equity or the progressivity with an annual flat fee, and that hits everybody the same. On the other hand, it's less than perfect, and I guess the other states, they must just say the mileage is the mileage, and we don't care what that mileage is actually where it's been traveled. How do other states deal with that, or do they just simply say, nothing's perfect?
I mean, so nothing is perfect, but there are ways to deal with that. Those are more technologically heavy solutions.
Right.
So it's plugging in a device that's then
it would be like commercial vehicles. They have to keep track, and
that's
then
right.
It's an elaborate system. But
so really, what we're looking at is trying to build something that's simple, that allows us to use our existing systems and recognize that nothing is perfect, that there will be those cases, but that over time, the system might be evolved to be able to better meet that. So there may be regional solutions that are developed that allow, for example, in the Northeast, there are several states that have a vehicle safety inspection every year and collect odometer readings. So there may be some sort of regional solution in the Northeast that allows us to start to capture that. It may become a choice that people opt in to being able to have a plug-in device so that those miles outside the state aren't charged. On the other hand, these vehicles are not paying anything now, and they're also not paying anything for federal tax. So the 18.4 cents for the federal tax is not being paid regardless of whether they're traveling in or out of state.
Senator Eagleson.
I have as much of a comment probably. I hear what Senator Kitchell says, and I also see a vast infrastructure being built for not a select few now, and hopefully later it won't be such a select few. But I've never seen government ever put in public dollars to build fuel stations or mini marts or anything like that. So at that point of time, the amount of money that we're spending to prop up this system of electric vehicle charging, I mean, it's not a perfect system, and I don't think anybody's getting hosed over it the way we're doing it. But there might be somebody that does pay a few extra cents. But we're spending millions and millions and millions of dollars to bring them that service. So I don't feel like anybody's getting shortchanged as far as if they pay a few extra dollars.
Patrick, you just raised something interesting that I hadn't thought of before, the notion of people opting in to disclose their mileage and tracking it in order to get a discount. So if the fee were larger, higher, they could, if they so desired, plug in one of these, get one of those devices, and then be able to evidence that they either put fewer miles on or the miles were in Vermont to get a discount on that register. But that seems convoluted and hard to track as well.
So Oregon does it, or one state did.
Yeah, Oregon does it, Utah as well. These are all voluntary systems that have been enacted to date. Hawaii is the one that actually has an implementation plan to put something into effect July 1, 2025.
We don't have the same border issues. Just, I thought I'd bring that up.
Yeah, no, so they benefit in a couple of different ways from that. So I mean, it is an imperfect system, but I think what we've tried to do in our proposed approach is to take the simplest path and then be able to build on that as we go, to learn from it. We're really focusing on just fully electric vehicles. So Hawaii is pointing towards basically transitioning their entire fleet to the mileage-based user fee by 2028. So what we're proposing is really to transition to a mileage-based user fee by transitioning the fleet rather than the fee itself.
Well, let's face it, if the median's $130, it's a huge sum that you have to worry about if you're a few miles off, one way or the other. If we were talking about a very large amount of money, then which you would have with commercial vehicles, I'm sure, it's a very different story. But
yeah, and
half your miles are outside the state of Vermont, and the median's 130. 50% of 130. Who's going to fall on their sword? Senator Ingalls.
Yeah.
I get it. I'd much rather see it in a different way. I hear what Mr. Murphy is talking about, the ease of getting us there. I think there's better ways to collect it. I think you can do it at time of charging. And I think we're a lot closer to than what anybody wants to talk about. We get some pushback from the electric utilities as far as doing that. Technology's there. We could say that, hey, this is what we're gonna do. You plug in, we collect a fee, and then at that point in time, we could get the federal portion of that as well. But that's not that's not the direction we're headed today. I think it's very important. We hear from the electric drivers that they feel like they're not paying their fair share. If we can start collecting some form of tax at some point in time, maybe we can perfect it later.
So New Hampshire's already they're ahead of us, $100.
So several states have a flat fee. Just a
Well, we talked about that. It was like a few
Registration
years ago, it
surcharge.
was $118 was the calculated equivalent of the lost gas tax. So this all seems to be within that range.
And so the benefits to it are just ease of administration. It's just you're applying an extra fee on top of the
And Mike
registration.
Smith could do it easily.
But whether he wants to or not is a different story. I think it's
No one would care. Senator Schitt.
So my question, and then maybe more towards Senator Kitchell, I feel like in previous conversations, we have been as a state reluctant to have variable fees that adjust according to any type of trackable index. But do you see an opportunity in this case where rather than it be $118 where the legislature has come back and adjust it, is there another way to have this tracked to something that would automatically go up over the years based on inflation or otherwise as a vehicle EV registration surcharge?
I think you've got that inflation adjustment regardless of any methodology, unless you build it in automatically. And normally, we do have a statute that we're supposed to update fees every 3 years. So I think we're coming back to that unless you just put in an automatic escalator and say it doesn't require statutory action.
Is that common, automatic escalators?
I don't think so. I think the fee bill has been pretty much on that 3-year cycle and then adjusting for inflation over that period of time.
Can you give us some things that kind of automatically increase just because like the price, like the assessments that are a percentage of the price, and so as the price would go up, then the assessment goes up?
We've seen that with purchase and use certainly.
Yeah.
That DeLorean car registration fee would do that, though. It's a separate
So
conversation.
you could tie this to a percentage of the gas tax or something like that, and say that or to the assessment or something like that. So and I don't know if other states have tried to match what the cars are not paying for gas tax. Has that been the common way, or do they just say $200 seems like a good number?
Well, you can see just from this map that some states decide to take a number from somewhere. But it's not necessarily reflective of what the average vehicle would pay. But the states that are trying to implement a mileage-based user fee have taken the sort of a similar approach to us, which is to try and just have the equivalent of what would have been paid if it were a gas vehicle.
And is it the agency's view that the mileage-based user fee would at some point extend to all vehicles, not just electric vehicles?
No, not at this time. I think, what I said just a few minutes ago, that, our focus is on electrification of the entire fleet. And so in doing so, you essentially transition the fleet to a mileage-based user fee.
It's arguable that the gas tax is the way of mileage-based user fee. Right?
Except
Although it's not
on your fuel
miles of your car.
efficiency.
And I think that as you get more EVs, if we do get to the levels that we're talking about, we're going to have to adjust it because you're going to keep on the way we're doing it right now. We're not capturing all the miles traveled like you do in a gasoline powered vehicle. And you're going to keep on seeing those contributions to all the funds that we have to support our roads going to keep on diminishing because we're not capturing. So we will have to adjust as we go. Do something that captures the amount of miles that are being driven.
Or we could also go, certainly, most people that travel in public are probably using the fast charge, unless they're staying in a resort, a lot of the resorts, but you could, the technology, I would think, would be fairly easy to do some kind of assessment when you're using those,
I just hate to,
those public services.
what I hate to do, and we're going down this path that I really don't want to go down, but I hear it. And it's a one-man band, and I think there's some support to explore Senator Kitchell, exactly what you're saying. I hate to get so invested in this one way when we know that sooner or later we're going to change. We're going to have to go to a mileage-based fee to keep our revenues up for the, this is a way, I mean, admittedly, this is a way to start collecting money now and get up there 5 or 6
You're a
million.
BMT proponent rather than a flat fee.
Well, I am but I'm more a proponent of this. I'm more a proponent of setting something up that we know that we're gonna have to change later, but we never do. We never do. We're in state government, we keep on building on top of it and building on top of it and building on top of it. And then all of a sudden it's like this and it wants to topple over, but then we don't have the political courage to change it. And that's where I'm thinking that we're headed down the way right now of setting it up wrong. And yes, I am. But I'm also willing to go along, to get us there, but feel it's my responsibility to say, I don't know that this is the right way to do it.
Well, I guess that raises the question of whether we have something transition or whether we move immediately to this. I think that's probably the heart of this discussion.
So what we propose in the report that was filed 31st is to incorporate adjustments over time so that you can keep pace with the cost of inflation, which we've seen in the past several years has been an issue. To be able to come to the right rate at the beginning. So recognizing that where we are right now in terms of gas tax, we've already fallen behind probably a decade due to fuel efficiency. So thinking about how we point back to the last time that the legislature had adjusted the gas tax and incorporate that into our calculation for the rate now. And then, also because there is a difference in the amount that it takes to collect the fee, to incorporate in some of the administrative costs. So for what we're proposing, and it's a key piece to what we're proposing, there may be some, it's estimated 3.6% administrative costs. It might be as high as 5%. So it's not a huge amount, but it's certainly much more than what the gas tax is now. The other solution that we talked about earlier, having a technology-heavy solution where you're relying upon a plug-in device. Somebody has to pay for that device. Then somebody also has to pay for the ongoing monitoring of it, and that's a much more expensive solution. In some cases, so we'll get into it a little bit, but with the per kilowatt hour fee, again, the administrative costs are quite high, 10%, I think, in Montana, where it's been administered, goes to the public utilities. So what we're trying to do with a mileage-based user fee based on the sort of manual odometer readings is to get at something that's very cost-effective, but that's fairer than what we have now. It's not going to be fair for everyone, but it's going to be fairer than it is now, and that's what our hope is. With the flat fee, the issue is that some folks would be hit right off the bat with the larger charge, and many now might be able to absorb that. But we do have a number of incentive programs that go to folks with lower incomes, and so one principle that we've relied upon in taking this approach is also that people be able to pay on a frequency that more closely reflects the gas tax, where it's not as huge an impact to somebody's monthly budget.
A more progressive approach, possibly considering an electric surcharge or electric plug-in vehicle, would be an ad valorem approach, where it's based on if it's a 10-year-old Prius or plug-in vehicle versus a 2-year-old vehicle to have a smaller amount for a lower value determinable like other states do and a higher value for a brand new Tesla. Is that something that you have considered as a variable rate based on the value of the car being registered?
It's something that the state of Virginia has done. It's a very convoluted system because they also incorporate fuel efficiency. And so I would just stress that what we're trying to do here is keep things as simple as possible, to be able to get something in place and to be able to then build upon that so that it can evolve as the Senator was discussing.
I wanted to get through the presentation, but is the agency opposed to a flat fee, or you just thought the miles-based user fee was a better way?
We thought that the mileage-based user fee was a better way. A number of, the 300, 400 folks that were surveyed also thought it was a better way. People just feel that it's fair because you're paying much more if you travel fewer miles, and then the folks that do travel quite a few miles aren't paying as much.
Have you, the survey, did you send it out to EV owners, or I was just
Yes,
wondering
this is going back to the
Example.
road usage charge study that we began in 2021.
I just can't remember what
And so
universe you sampled.
yeah, it went out to a lot of different EV owners, and even when you segment the survey work just for those EV owners, more were in favor of a
I
mileage.
confess I don't have the detailed memory of the 21 study.
Right.
I can't believe that.
And I haven't looked at the report yet.
Just really quick, and I know you want to move along, but you said you want to keep it simple, but the thing you said before then is that it will hit some people disproportionately. And I just say simple taxes are less fair, and more complex taxes like what we do in the Ed Fund is arguably more fair. So I just don't think we should dismiss outright the notion of what I see a lot of other states do, which is have a variable rate based on the value of the car being registered. I'll leave it at that.
Often equity requires more complication. No steps. Okay.
So
Wear and tear is the same, regardless of whether it's mine or yours. Older
Well,
and
there is probably less.
also
Senator Birchwick wants us to keep going.
He's got a lot of slides.
I understand his impatience. Let's keep going.
I think to the senator's point, so when you think about a road usage charge as a utility charge, there are some programs on the margins that will offer a reduced rate for those with lower incomes, but there are plenty of fees that are just flat fees across the board, and you just look across the street at DMV, and there's no reductions in those fees because of somebody's income. It's because people are having that the same impact upon the roads as another, regardless of how much money they make. And it's not always a choice, but there are other options to be able to get around besides using a vehicle. So there was some language in last year's legislation, the transportation bill, to look at per kilowatt hour fees. We're continuing to monitor what's going on with that. There are very few states that have actually implemented any of these. A few of them have just begun as of January of this year. Others point to January of next year. And many have struggled with just being able to implement it. I cited Montana as having very high administrative costs, so not getting as much from what they expected. There is an issue in terms of tax avoidance. So where majority of charging is done at home, 80 to 90% of charging is done at home, you're not going to be able to capture that revenue if it's just a per kilowatt hour fee. It does have the advantage of being able to capture some of the out-of-state travel. But then you get into issues around the potential for double taxation, where those that don't maybe have access to home charging are more reliant upon public charging, and then it becomes hard to disentangle, how you issue refunds or rebates. It becomes a convoluted system for those
For a
folks who
relatively
live
small amount of money.
for a very small amount of money. When we looked at it back in 2021, and all the universe of public charging out there at the time, we saw that it might only bring in $5,000 or so, and would have a significant implementation cost. So other states, like I was saying, have looked towards a mileage-based user fee. It's a fairer, more cost-effective way of obtaining revenue needed for the transportation fund. 4 states have implemented programs, but they're all voluntary, as I was saying before. Only Hawaii is pointing towards actually a mandatory program. And even then, in the case of Hawaii, what they're saying is in 2025, you can either choose, you'll have 3 years to choose either the flat fee option, which in Hawaii is $50, or paying mileage-based user fee. So they're phasing it in a way that's I think less of a blow to people, that people can still pay just $50 for a road use charge 3 years into their implementation. So we did look, the road usage charge advisory committee back in the fall of 2021 into 2022, and a number of these issues that we've talked about this morning, and came to the consensus that we need to develop a long-term and sustainable revenue strategy to maintain our infrastructure, that all future funding ought to be fair, where drivers are contributing to the maintenance of the network.
Maybe you should put as fair as possible.
As fair as possible. Fair is different for different people in different situations, but fairer. And then any funding policy ought to be aligned with the Climate Action Plan, and I should say the Comprehensive Energy Plan as well. And so we felt that this was the best way to do it, to build upon the odometer readings that are gathered at the annual vehicle safety inspection process, and then to be able to have people sign up, enroll in a program through the registration process, and begin to track mileage through that annual inspection process.
What if somebody doesn't pay?
So we'll get to that.
Oh.
Yeah, that's a key piece of.
I mean, you have to pay at time of sale as opposed to,
Right.
Okay, sorry, I'm sure it's ahead.
So
You give it to the tax department.
I'll skip ahead to that then.
I think Senator Chittenden already has skipped it.
Yeah.
I'm looking on your screen.
You modeled that behavior.
So this is just, I won't walk through all of these different arrows, but to give a sense of what a system might look like if it were implemented here in Vermont. And it may take different forms than what has been laid out here, but essentially you have some existing systems that manage the vehicle inspection process and the odometer readings and the transfer of data. We also have, other systems that manage the registration process and the various fees that folks pay when they go to DMV. And so what we're envisioning is that enrollment would happen at the registration process. Certainly that education, outreach about the program would happen at the registration process, so that people would be have an account. And whether it's tied to the person or the vehicle, I think the preference is that it be tied to the vehicle, that there would be some account mechanism for people to go online and pay. But also that there'd be, still the ability to use traditional methods, people coming into DMV and still accept payment in that way. it's envisioned that in some ways, it's not just a mileage-based user fee, but that there's a flat fee as well. And the flat fee is sort of a backstop. It's the compliance mechanism. So that if people are not, going and getting their vehicle inspected on an annual basis, they wouldn't then have that data that we would grab from the vehicle inspection process to be able to apply a mileage-based user fee. And so then the default would become a flat fee based upon perhaps the 98th percentile of what people would travel on average here in Vermont. So that there's an encouragement, if you don't get your vehicle inspected, or if you don't, pay as you go, you're held to that higher amount, which becomes a flat fee. And again, it's envisioned that this would happen at the time of registration renewal, so that people come in. It's, DMV would be able to see whether or not somebody was current with their mileage-based user fee. If they're not, it's sort of like they don't get a thumbs up, so they can't move on in the process to register the vehicle. That is a key consideration, but using a registration hold to be able to encourage compliance is another way, I think, to make things fair. So it's not tied to the person. You're not suspending somebody's license because they, still have other travel needs, and they could meet those in a different way by traveling in a different vehicle. It's really getting at the impact that the vehicle itself has upon the road system. So, I don't know, are there specific questions on this slide before
I don't have anybody else.
Do you currently have the ability in the Department of Motor Vehicles, when a car is registered with a VIN number, to determine the energy source that VIN number has, or would any type of registration fee be through self-attestation stating that it is a battery electric vehicle?
So the registration process includes the VIN number and includes the engine type.
By the attesting to it, or the VIN number looks up?
No,
VIN
it's
number.
connected to the VIN number. Yeah. So one of the things, so in the old system that's now being updated, hybrids were treated as one category, so plug-in hybrids and conventional hybrids, and so that's one of those things that we're going to want to address, so that we're able to separate out plug-in hybrids and then be able to call those vehicles out for a higher registration fee. And then the fully electric vehicles already are very easily identified, and so we can, right at the point of registration, be able to see this vehicle should be subject to the mileage-based user fee.
So the agency isn't proposing any language now because it's going to, in your other slides, go into this, but right, so that's the kind of the punchline is that if you issue the report, you're waiting for the federal funding, there isn't any need for action now as far as the agency is concerned.
That's right. So the federal funding was authorized in November 2021. We expected it to come out the following year, November 22. I have some slides that updated those expectations, and they still weren't met. But that is a key piece to us being able to implement a system, because it might cost $3.5–4 million, and we want to be able to take advantage of that federal funding, which is now at an 80 federal 20% state match.
So we're sitting here, obviously, with reduced revenues. Some things we could do very quickly, and that gets back to my question. How long it would take really to transition to this mileage-based user fee, the extent to which we would do something interim, if we in fact said, well, in the meantime, until we get the federal, which seems to be some delay, as you've indicated. I mean, there's been slippage on the date. Has there been consideration that we do something like a flat fee at time of registration? a surcharge and with the anticipation that that would be the interim revenue substitute until we can put this mileage-based system in place.
I think, one thing we just want to be careful about is that issue that I laid out earlier, the ability to pay as you go or to not pay up a huge amount upfront. And so Hawaii addressed that very scenario by sort of pegging their flat fee at a much lower amount than the average. So they're at $50, and it's earning some revenue
50 versus nothing.
versus, right. So there is possibility of implementing something like that so that
Well, I don't mean to give Mike a rash, but it seems to me with our new system, putting some kind of a surcharge, even if I hate to say it, but you could do 6-month registration, something like that, to break it up for people that are really poor. I don't know, it just seems like at this point, with the federal match that we're foregoing, with anemic revenues into the fund, that maybe a 2-part, getting to countdown to Nirvana, if that's what you want to call it, might be another option here than simply postponing, because there's a certain impatience, and we're getting, and I hate to say it, but there's almost a resentment. I'm paying and you're not, which is unfortunate, but it's the reality out there. So I just bring it up as a 2-step process, being driven by, our revenue reality. So I'm just throwing it out there, and Mike hasn't totally disintegrated, but it's just, to me, it's an option that we shouldn't consider.
My thinking is exactly in the same place where you are, Senator Kitchell, to the progressivity concern about the ability to pay. I wonder if you can just as easily determine the engine type as the newness of the car. And in my mind, people that are buying a 1 or 2-year-old electric vehicle, those are going to be more expensive. And so if we had the electric surcharge initially on newer, more expensive vehicles, ability to pay, but if somebody's buying a 5 or 10-year-old used electric vehicle, maybe waiving it there. I'm just wondering if that's an intermediary step. But I guess I need to understand more who's buying electric cars. I have it in my mind that people that buy electric cars, exactly as your point said, Senator McDonald, they want to pay, they want to contribute, but I'm getting a no from
Until they have to. Until they have to.
Yeah.
Well, we know that the people that would have more limited income are in the used car market, and they are, and we know that from Mileage Smart, that's where they're getting their cars, and with the tax credit, we're seeing a higher take up. So I don't know. There are probably, you can get into all kinds of differentials if the car is more than, frankly, I get, if I were, you're not going to have perfection, certainly. I'm a lost leader to the entire state in terms of travel, in terms of gambling, in terms of smoking, etc. I mean, so drinking, no, I don't even drink. So,
Vape?
huh?
You only vape?
No, I don't even. So,
And
and I have the oldest vehicles in the fleet. So my point is, maybe there's some way that we can accommodate it, or if you're, I don't know. I hate to get too complicated, because we're really still talking about a very modest amount of money. But if the estimate was over $1 million, right? The last, we're up to, and that's not insignificant in this, fiscal reality that we're finding ourselves.
So I just want to clarify that, our initial hope was to be able to launch a program in July 1, 2025, which is what the transportation bill last year had highlighted. And we still think that, we should be able to apply for a federal grant this spring. And the hope would then be to come back next January with some statutory language, and then be able potentially to implement starting January 2026. So the differential in implementation might only be
A year?
6 months or so. Certainly no more than a year. And it will be at the time when we're hoping to see a lot more electric vehicles, so that the amount that we're gonna be able to capture will be significant. Right now, it's estimated roughly $1.5 million based on the 12,750 vehicles we have. But that, certainly in a year and a half time, would rise pretty quickly.
Okay. Anything else on any of the other slides? I think you sort of covered your other slides in general, but anything else?
So, just talking through the rate considerations, we had some discussion about that, about how to arrive at the figure. Compliance obviously is an important part of being able to make sure we're capturing the revenue. But this is just the change to the timeline at the moment.
At the moment.
January 1st, 2026 is what you're thinking. Okay. And Mike, can I ask you a question? If we were to create a new registration for EVs, what do you think you would say about when you can start such a new?
January.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Would it be January 25 is probably what you'd say, or could you do it by July?
The hard part is we're also heading into the second
Oh, right,
phase of our
yeah.
project too,
Yeah.
so I mean, clearly limiting new stuff would be our desire, so we're focused on our area, but I would say January would be the minimum.
Okay. All right, well, we will talk about this more, and there's Patrick's contact information, but we have several ways of getting hold of Patrick if we want. And, thank you for taking the bus. Okay.
In comparison to FHW Way, I wasn't so late.
Yeah. Okay, so we were gonna also hear from Wayne from the Alliance of Auto Manufacturers on this issue before we take a break. Unless somebody has another last question for Patrick. Okay, thank you, Patrick.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Patrick, very good.
Welcome back.
Good morning, thank you. Yes, I love the conversation. You guys are always, it's your second year talking about this issue. You're always more informed than all the other legislators I deal with on a regular basis. It's just a great conversation. No, it is.
Donuts work good too.
It is genuine. It is fully genuine. I often have to start at the base level and kind of walk people through. You've already jumped 3, 4, 6 things that I would say. For the record, my name is Wayne Weichel. I'm here with the Alliance for Automotive Innovation. As a reminder, we represent the automakers that manufacture nearly 95% of all new cars sold each year, as well as major suppliers and other automotive companies, technology companies.
Are any of the all EV manufacturers members?
Interestingly, VinFast, they are a new Vietnamese company. They're just coming to market now. They're building $1 billion plant in North Carolina. They just joined.
Okay.
Rivian, Lucid, and Tesla are not yet. But it's we have on most issues we have a shared focus. Before I forget, I should thank the committee for your favorable consideration of the comfort airbag legislation and putting that in DMV. That is something we've pushed and supported across the country, and really appreciate that. I guess I should start with an apology. When you guys were discussing this last year, we didn't really have a good position on this, other than we didn't want any more fees on any EVs, regardless of how you framed it. I cover the Northeast. You saw that map with no EV fees on the Northeast. I've spent the last 10 years going around the country saying all the reasons why EV fees are bad. And this is where, on CNN, they would cut to me sitting probably in this chair saying all the downsides of EV fees.
We had an epiphany.
Yeah, we had an epiphany. And you know what the epiphany was? The epiphany was, yes, EV fees have downsides, of which you've already touched on some of them. But the more we looked at VMT fees and kilowatt hour fees, we realized, you know what? Maybe EV fees aren't that bad. So we, went around and around with our members and got them to be in a position to support reasonable EV fees.
As opposed to VMT.
As opposed to BMT, in opposed to kilowatt hour, in opposed to our old position, which was, they shouldn't pay anything. So, we're in a whole new world now. I provided written testimony.
I could just challenge that just a little bit, sorry. So why would you pay less than what a gas powered vehicle would pay? Why?
Sure, I'm glad that is no longer our position. Yeah, I mean, previously our view, and this is,
Vehicles miles traveled is like, I mean, we've already said in the former testimony that we're not collecting the full amount of tax on the way we're doing it right now. So why would you still support strongly something that, basically your users on electric vehicles aren't paying their fair share?
yeah, I don't know if that's an accurate representation. If you appropriately price an EV fee and, as noted, put an escalator on it so it keeps up with inflation, we think that's a way to capture it that's so much simpler. I mean, if you saw all those states that were lit up, those were all pilot programs and studies and people examining, how do we do this? How do we do this? And then you've already touched on the timeline of how long it'll take to get up to speed. EV fees, you could next year flip a switch and you would be up and running on that. The higher implementation costs that they spoke of, the pilot programs don't highlight, let me back up. The challenge of not being able to tax across state borders, I think, is bigger than was presented to you. You do not have the authority. Hawaii is the only state that doesn't have this problem, but especially in New England, people are driving outside the state. You do not have the authority to tax them. Without question, if you just go with a odometer reading each year, you will be challenged in court. I mean, absolutely maybe not an individual, but an anti-tax group absolutely will challenge it. You don't have the authority to do it. So what these other states have gone through, and they've made that assessment, is doing some sort of plug-in. And that's how they track the geolocations. They know when you're in state and out of state. Obviously, we think that's a problem, and a lot of people don't like the idea of being tracked for tax purposes. So there was I referenced this in my testimony, but there's a San Jose state study. We have no association to it. It just happens to support what our members have found internally, which runs counter to what the agency apparently found in their study. Was people hate the idea of VMT fees. They hate the idea. If 61% vote, said they opposed it, and of that 40% said they really opposed it, strongly opposed. Our problem is, we're trying to sell EVs. The challenge of not just convincing someone to switch from ICE vehicle to EV, now we have to say, oh, and you have to accept a tax structure that you don't like. And I do think it was interesting that he said they polled EV drivers. EV drivers aren't the problem. EV drivers now accept some challenges to drive EVs. They're used to that. The study should be on prospective EV drivers. And in Vermont, that's everybody. I mean, you want us to switch to 100% EVs. We're talking about everybody. So that's our problem. We think it'll be a disincentive to purchase EVs.
Even with the California regulations that we've just implemented.
Car rule.
The car rule.
Yeah, I mean, that's requiring going to 100% EVs.
Well, I'm just saying we have some other external factors at work. That's all that would drive that decision.
Yeah, just to clarify, the survey was done of both EV drivers and the general population.
Fine. You probably don't have a representative sample to see what the difference might be in response between the two groups.
We can share that with you.
It would be interesting what people said if they were opposed to the idea of paying a gas tax, because that could also be 60%.
Yeah.
Well, they want it, but it shouldn't cost anything.
Right, I don't, when I paid a gas tax, I didn't like it, I was opposed.
Somebody else to pay.
Oh, well, yeah, don't tax.
Okay, but go ahead.
Yeah, so that's our problem. That's our real problem with VMTs. We see it as being, you would have to have some sort of geolocation tracking. to do a geolocation tracking with a dongle, which is what these pilot programs have been studying, your implementation costs go way up. I've heard higher than 50%. Those pilot programs do not like to say how much it costs because, you know, they go, well, it's just a pilot, we're working it out. Well, it's like, and for the states, there's some states that will imply that, oh, we get it straight from the vehicle. It took me a while to figure out what that actually was because our members, you know, we don't provide that information to governments telematically. What happens, as I understand it, is the state has contracted with a third party, and then they reach out to a consumer directly, and they actually ask for the login information to their like mobile app, and they routinely go in and check the mobile app and download the data from there, which you're giving a third party to know where you're going. And so we think there are all sorts of problems with that. So we come back around to just do an EV fee. I mean, Senator Kitchell hit right on it of, if you set it right, you can have this up and running quickly, set the price the right amount, you actually are capturing the amount you need to, and it's a stable revenue source. There's no guessing, did you set it right, did you not set it right, you know, do you have it just the right per mile? Just set an EV fee, and you know, all of this problem goes away. Sure, perhaps in the considerable future that there's you know, more interest in it, or you know, technologies are more advanced, or any number of, you know, a regional approach, revisit it. But why wait 3, 4, 5, 6 years to come, which is what all those states are doing, to come up with something that would actually bring in revenue? I mean, this has not been our position for a long time. You know, and we also see similar problems just quickly on kilowatt hour taxes. As was referenced, most of these states that have done a kilowatt hour tax have only focused on commercial, which are only capturing, you know, 20, 10%. You really have to do residential to make that substantial, and to do residential, you have to find a way to segment electricity in the household. You're talking about a sub-metered panel, or potentially in the future, a network connected charger, but you also need the utilities on the back end to be able to get that information. So we see that as actually being the longest path, which brought us all the way back to just do an EV fee.
I think Senator Kitchell, correct me if I'm wrong, you said do an EV fee and just to get the money flowing, and then we would do what he's not asking us to do later. Okay, well, I just want to make sure. Okay, so yeah, I agree with him.
Then the
So
technology, I mean, you talked about it with the evolution of technology and so forth, what we could do in a few years would
And you
be
can
able
almost do
to
it.
segment the use in, you know, for charging versus household use, so.
And as has happened, you might evolve on your position on that in 3 or 4 years from now, you might be in support of that.
I love that, my position has evolved. I was for it before I was against it, remember?
I think that is the mark of a wizened and thoughtful policy consideration.
Only a fool never changes his mind.
An old fool, is that what you said?
It's only a fool
Oh,
never
only a fool.
changes their mind.
well, we got a little Kitchellism coming from that side of the table.
Well, my grandmother used to say only fools and kids tell the truth. She was wise.
That's our position. I've provided in written testimony.
Yeah.
You know, we were the biggest opponents of EV fees, but the more, you know, we've considered the issue, and in really realizing we're past the point of alpha consumers adopting EVs when it was really, you know, difficult. They were new technology, it was new to the market. Now the EVs that are on the market are, you know, they sell themselves once you get someone in them. And with the slope of adoption that is targeted, we appreciated that it was not a sustainable position for us to come in and say that they shouldn't pay anything. So, you know, we support a reasonable EV fee. I think, you know, you've already done some of the math. You're in the 118, 130, 150, depending. And we would have no objection to that.
Great, thank you. Any other questions for Sean? Good.
No, appreciate it. Thank you for the time.
Patrick, did you have a comment you want to make?
Couple things. So I just wanted to say, first of all, in terms of a registration fee, you're not capturing any out-of-state revenue.
Right.
It's the same comparison. Secondly, there's an issue here about a funding source that is being eroded. We have it now with the gas tax. The same problem is with the per kilowatt hour fee because it models the same, it's a proxy
Right.
for road usage. The same is true of the flat fees. And across that country, all the states that are lit up, they're finding that those flat fees are not meeting the revenue needs. Why? I mean, why is the Alliance for Automotive Innovation arguing for this? Because you're going to have drivers paid less over time. So it's not a sustainable revenue source. I understand that the interest in kind of using it as an interim, as a bridge to get to where we need to be. But it's just important to be clear that over the long term, you are not going to be able to capture all the folks who are driving above the average or wherever you end up setting that fee. Because you'll just start falling behind again like we are now with the gas tax.
Okay.
Thank you.